Have you ever seen those videos where it's like a YouTuber and it's like my daily routine? It's like, today was a really rough day. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then I filmed and then I ate dinner, then I went to sleep. That was my like rough day.
From what? Content creation is harder than your 9 to 5.
Um, because that was not even joking, because how hard it is to film a YouTube video never occurred to me. So here we are. Hi, welcome. It's Val Reads. And for my first video, I thought I was gonna go through all of my top 10 favorite books because I love talking about them. And if you know me, I never stop talking about them ever. You should definitely subscribe because you gotta hear about my recommendations, and maybe find something to read, maybe find a movie to watch, maybe find an album to listen to. Who knows? Okay, so for my first book, these are in no particular order because I just love them all too much. But the first one is this cracking book. It is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. And if you haven't read this, you've definitely heard of it. And I feel like half the population has read it in school, half the population just hasn't read it at all. And some people hate it, some people love it. I particularly love it. I think it's just one of the most iconic and just relatable books that I've ever read. Um, so if you don't know, this book follows the main character Holden as he goes through kind of a growing up story in a very short period of time. So he goes to a prep school and at the beginning of the book is expelled. And instead of going home and telling his parents, hey, I've gotten expelled, he decides, you know what, I'm just gonna go to New York and do whatever the heck I want. And so he goes to New York City, and the book follows him for 4 days, and he just gets into trouble. He just does whatever the heck he wants. And honestly, it's just so good. He doesn't hold back on anything. He's so like for real with his readers. He knows what he's doing. And I just like appreciate him so much for that. It's just a beautiful book and it starts off like kind of strong. You're like, okay, like he's gonna eat this up, this trip up, and then you realize, oh, maybe a teenager shouldn't be wandering the streets alone. And yeah, it's just honestly, it's just so beautiful and it works out so well. Honestly, it's such been such a big thing in my life. For example, in the book, the main character, Holden, his brother Ali, when he was younger, had a baseball glove and had written all over it poems in green Sharpie. And literally, this prior softball season, I had my mitt and I wrote all over it in green with poems because you know what? I will not miss an opportunity to talk about this book. It is so good. And if you haven't read it in school, definitely check it out because it is not overrated. It deserves all the hype it gets. So yeah, that's The Catcher in the Rye. All right, so my next book is 1984 by George Orwell, and this is like the biggest spined book. So like you see it from a mile away. It's kind of like iconic, but also this copy is so skinny. Like when I was reading it, I was like, the spine is cracked and everything. But this is 1984 by George Orwell, and I mean, I think this is really like the only two like American classics that I have in here. I read a lot, but this is like the top two. And if you also major school book, but I didn't read actually either of these in school. Actually, I didn't read any of these in school, but this one I read a few years ago, and when I tell you it got me into reading, oh my god, it is so good. It was catching from the first moment. Oh, just beautiful. So the book, if you haven't read it, is followed by the main character, Winston, who lives in a dystopian society that basically tracks your every move, your every doing, your every relationship, and basically rewrites history as a whole. So things such as, like writing in a journal or, like having a relationship with like your girlfriend literally cannot happen. It's just not how it goes in that world. And he kind of starts to realize like, what the heck are we doing? Like, what is going on? So that's kind of what happens, and he starts to rebel against this stuff alongside his partner Julia, who is a major character in the book. And actually, there's recently a retelling of it and came out recently, so I'm super excited to read that. That's on the TBR. But this is just like is the original George Orwell, my man. He eats every book he writes. He just eats. And if you read Animal Farm, it's like really not like that at all. Like it's completely different. So if you read Animal Farm, you don't have to. It's different. If you read Animal Farm, it's a different storyline. So it's not simplified. It's not dumbed down. It's just regular. You don't need really much prior information to start it, and I think it's just really good. I read it in 8th grade, so it's not like a high level book. I mean, you can analyze it as much as you want, but it's really, really good. The ending, top tier. If you know, you know. Great book. Okay, so the next book is Almond. Ooh. The next book is Almond by Juan Pion San, and oh my god, this book is so good. It is just one of my favorites, obviously, because it's on this list, but it is just so beautiful and such a great coming of. I mean, a lot of these are coming of age, but like this is such a great coming of age story. So this book follows a young boy who is born with a brain condition that makes one of the lobes in your brain basically insensible to any emotions. So he doesn't feel any emotions like sadness, anger, pretty much happiness. He doesn't feel it. It's very non-existent in his lifestyle, and he has to kind of grow up with that fact. Okay, so this book is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and it follows four characters who meet in college at Harvard, which are Jude, St. Francis, Willem, Malcolm, and JB. And it follows their life through all of that up until 50 years old. So definitely not a little life, definitely a significant life, but it is such a stunning book. And if you're not a sad book reader, probably don't pick this up. If you're looking for something light to read, definitely don't read this because it is a full 816 pages. It is no easy task to get through this. It took me 3 months to read, but throughout their life, it is stricken with kind of tragedy and loss and love and friendship. So it is just so much different emotions. And when I say every chapter, there's only like 6 chapters, but every chapter is a different story. It's a different story. I mean, one is called The Happy Years, and the years were not happy, guys. Like, spoiler, it is not a happy book. But if you can't get through those kind of tougher themes of abuse, of violence, of mental health, it's not going to be light. It's that has all of those things. But if you are somebody that can get through those, definitely pick this up because it has made me such a good person. It made me such an open-minded person. If you know me, I have a little life stuff everywhere. It has its own little sticker because I love it so much. Um, I just this book is just one of my favorites. So that's A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Definitely pick it up if you can get through it. And if you want a really sad read, because the last few pages covered in tears because I could not read any of those pages because I was just like bawling my eyes out at 3 o'clock in the morning reading it. Okay, so the amount of times I've talked about this book and it just stopped filming, countless. So I think I have a good idea of what this book is about now. So as you could see, it is very small, and I enjoy small books. So, um, A Little Life is out of this question because this is The Flowers of Buffonery by Osamu Dazai, and I love Dazai as a writer. He never misses. But this book is about Yozo Oba, who is recovering in a facility. When you're going to visit somebody in that situation, are you going to try to be sad? No, you're trying to like laugh and make them have a little bit of fun, right? And you're trying to get their spirits up. So, honestly, when I say this is the funniest book I've ever read, so that's what really the whole book is about. Just his friends visiting him, his friends trying to make him feel better, his friends trying to make light out of his situation. And it's a character that's been continued. So the first book is No Longer Human. And that one's kind of sad. But this made me laugh so hard. This book made me just so happy as a person. And honestly, Dazai is just so funny. Just so funny because literally, hold on, let me read you the last two lines of the book. Under the heavy morning mists, the seawater was churning. And then, no, that's all I have. Literally, that's he just stopped writing. He was just like, okay, that's good. Like, I think that's enough. And just throughout the book, he kind of like interrupts himself. He's just like, eh. And I just love that about him. He's so real. He just does not try to play with anybody. Okay, tell me this is recording because this book I've talked about so much, like at least 3 times. This book is The Guest by Emma Cline, and I read this summer, so it's very recent and just a stunning book. So well written, so well done. So it's a book that follows the character Alex, who is a young woman who is living with an older man and is basically his girlfriend until there's kind of a dispute that causes her to have to leave the house. And that wouldn't be a problem unless, she had a place to stay, but she doesn't. So the whole novel is kind of a recounting of the end of her summer and how she's just trying to find a place to stay, a place to talk to people, a place to get food, a place to, just get a ride. And she is so smart about her decisions in meeting people. She'll go up to people and be like, "Hey, do I know you?" Just to, like get a ride. And I think she's just so good for that. And normally I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy this. This was so good. And the novel is just encountering of that until the last part. And the last part is kind of mentioned throughout the story about how she knows that and the man that she was with in the beginning is going to be holding a Labor Day party at his house. So she knows she can return for that and try to win him back. So that's The Guest. And honestly, it's such a good book, such a summertime read. If you want to like this, if you can't read it in the end of the summer, it is just fits the vibe so well. So that's The Guest by Emma Cline. Definitely check it out because the writing is so good and the characters are just so well written. Okay, so the next book is also kind of a big book. How many pages is it? It is um it's 400 pages, so it's kind of long. And if you know me, I largely dislike fantasy books. I just not into it. It's so hard to follow, so hard to get into. And this book was one of my first fantasy books. And oh my god, this is my favorite book. Like one of my favorite books because literally it is so easy to read. So this let me introduce it first. This is The House in the Cerulean Sea. This book follows the main character, Linus Baker, who works in the city, works for a government position that basically controls children in orphanages. But they're a little bit special because they control magical children and they oversee all of the functions that run it and where they are located and basically how dangerous they are. Spoiler alert, they're not dangerous, they're just little kids. His job is to go and to kind of report back on this orphanage on an island that holds six of the most dangerous, quote unquote dangerous, children that they know of. And when I tell you this is one of the most lighthearted, easy to read books, um, so like I've never read a fantasy book before. This was so good. It is not. It's just a little touch of fantasy. It's great. Um, I love it. I think it's amazing. And these children were so lovable, so fun to read about. And their kind of master of the orphanage, Arthur, is just love him. Oh my god. And it's kind of like an unlikely like family moment, kind of finding the people that you love in the places that you least expect it, and it's just a beautiful book. However, there is a interesting kind of discussion surrounding this book. It's really interesting discussion of who gets to talk about these kind of topics because this book as a whole is inspired by and is kind of like a learning lesson about um, the events that happened in the assimilation of Native American children being kind of put up for adoption to white families and being forced to understand white traditions in American school systems. So that kind of raises the question, is a white author allowed to be telling that story? Is their rendition of that narrative effective? Is that really a way to be learning about this? And in no way is it making fun of that. In no way is it, it's literally the book is just kind of meant to change minds. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's a question to be raised about, is this an accurate representation of that? And do we want to be talking about it in that way? Not sure. Honestly, I didn't know that before I started reading it. So I think it's a great book, but definitely something to consider because it's definitely an interesting topic. And I just didn't think that this book could discuss it in that way. And I think it's honestly a great composition of those. But I would love to hear other people's opinions on this because it's honestly interesting to hear about. So yeah, that's that's the House in the Cerulean Sea. Great one. And this is not on the top 10, but I just thought I'd bring it out. This is the sequel that came out last month. This is Somewhere Beyond the Sea. And oh my gosh, it is almost as good as the first one. I debated putting it on this list, but that would be too much. But this is the sequel that follows Arthur, the kind of father of the orphanage, and oh, stunning book, stunning book. Definitely read it. It is so funny. I love how witty these characters are. Very British, very British. Love these books. Love these books so much. If you read the first one and you're like, "Oh, I'm so sad it ended," definitely read the second one. So, this also very short book um, is Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. And when I tell you this book is annotated, like what? Like every page is just like full of these little markers. This book was written in 1914 and follows this character who is unnamed and this other character named Sensei. And this is definitely the oldest on the list, but when I tell you it was like watching an episode of like Real Housewives.
I don't think that he's good for you. How do you know what's good for me? That's my opinion!
The drama, the drama in this book. I read it when I was like younger, so it wasn't like too hard to read, I don't think. But um it's comprised of three sections. One is Sensei and I, one is my parents and I, and one is Sensei and his testament. Oh, the last section, you need to read it because the last section is so juicy, so jaw dropping. Like literally, my jaw was dropped. I was like literally reading the last page. I don't think I even have any markers because I was so like shocked. I couldn't even put down my thoughts. I was like so sad. Oh my god, it was so sad, so heartbreaking, but so interesting. And the first part recounts the main character and his encounter with an older man named Sensei that he meets in college. And he kind of graduates college by the end of that story. The second part of the story is the main character going back home to visit his parents, and his father is sick. So it is a telling of his experiences back at home and caring for his father. And then he comes back home, and that segues into the third part where he receives a letter back from Sensei talking about how he has lost all faith in humanity, why he's decided to do what he did. And oh my gosh, the last page was shocking. so sad. Like the last part is like literally like all blue because I was so sad reading this book, but it was so good. Like oh my god, it was so good. Um yeah, honestly, read it because the drama in this book so good. Like I never thought it was like, such a strong book, but it really is. It's a really short read. Definitely read it if you can because it's so good. That's Kokoro. Kokoro literally means heart. Um, there's a lot of heart in this book. There's a lot of drama and a lot of heart. So definitely check that out. I'm gonna talk about the one that I don't have on this list. So there's one, if you count, there's a book I don't have on this list called Of Dogs and Walls by Yuko Tsushima. And she is the author. She's the daughter of Dazai. And I never knew this. And I was like shocked to find out that, she was a writer as well. And when I tell you her writing style is so similar to his and it's so beautiful, but I was like, oh, that's so neat. Like I wonder how much inspiration she has until you realize the history of these two people as a whole. So Dazai, as I mentioned, kind of the first one, his is kind of like an autobiography of how he in his life is like he died I think around like 40, I want to say like 40 years old, and by taking his own life. So not only did he leave behind so many people, he left behind his daughter, who was only one at the time, and that is the author of these two short stories. The first one being called The Watery Realm, and the second one being called Of Dogs and Walls. These are two of the most beautiful, kind of symbolic stories I've ever read. It's only 50 pages as a total, as it's only 50 pages in total. So good, so good. So the first one follows the author and was written in 1983. So it was follows the author as a kind of contemplation of how her father's death has impacted her life. And when it's so sad, but I think it's kind of beautiful to understand that history because I didn't know about it. And Dazai is one of my favorite people, on earth. But I never knew how that could have affected him and his family. So she was one when he took his own life, so she never really knew him. And it's not seen as a kind of like positive relationship. It's kind of just a encounter of that. And there's this one quote from the book that I just have at the top of my head all the time and I always think about it. It's just as my mother belonged to the kitchen, my father belonged to the graveyard, which is so as a Dazai fan, oh my god, just like so good. And I think it's like beautiful. The second one was written in 2014 by the same author, but it was written in 2014, and it's kind of a discussion, like very much parallels to that, but it's a discussion of her homes as a child and her dogs as a child, and her family and mother daughter relationships, and her relationship with her brother who has a disability, and kind of strengthening that relationship with him. It's kind of hard to talk about it without like giving away like the whole story, but really, really good. And if you ever get a chance to read Dazai, I would definitely check this book out because oh my god, it is so good. Very short read. I think it took me like I think I read it in one sitting. Really, really good. So check that book out. This book is definitely something to tackle. This is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This story is a retelling of David Copperfield, but completely different sense. It's American for one, so that's different. But also two, it's like a completely different discussion of things. It's overall, yeah, it's the same kind of storyline, but discussion of completely different things. So follows Demon, who is a young boy growing up in a trailer park in Virginia, and only has his mom, who is a drug addict and being abused by Demon's stepfather. And when he kind of loses that connection with his mom, he is sent through the foster care system, and it's a kind of recollection of his trials and tribulations through that, his triumphs, his very low lows, very high highs, and it was a long book. It was the first book I read this year because I knew there was no like kind of other way I could get through it because it just needed to be strong and so beautiful. Look how well annotated. But it is such a good book. I heard that Barbara Kingsolver visited um the David Copperfield's author's home and literally was spoken to saying you need to write a retelling of this book. Don't know if that's true, but honestly, she did it well. She ate this one up. She knew what she was doing. Um, and all of the kind of themes in this book are so well written about, so well spoken about his experiences, in the foster care system, his experience with drug abuse, his experience with mental abuse, his experience making friends, losing friends, and um it's just a beautiful story, and I felt like I was with him every step of the way. I felt like I was going through it with him, and when I stopped reading this book, I was like, "Oh my god, like I miss him. I miss him as a character." And when he was going through his best moments, I was so happy for him, and when I was like, "No, don't go back to being bad." And he you know what? He made it through, but honestly, it was a long journey. And yes, it's just such a beautiful book, such a good retelling. And yeah, so that's Demon Copperhead. Definitely check it out because it is such a good discussion of all of those themes. Hey, thank you for watching my video. um i, I hope you liked these suggestions because they're definitely an eclectic grouping of stories, but definitely many of my favorites, and honestly they're so good. Like, if you can check out at least one of these, I would be so happy, and like talk to me about them because I literally love talking about them like so much. But if you can read one of these, definitely try it out because there's definitely something for everyone in here. And if you like this video, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. You know what's up. Definitely subscribe because there's gonna be a lot of fun things. Maybe you could find a book to read. Maybe you could find a movie to watch. Maybe you could find an album to listen to. There's gonna be a lot of stuff going on. Stay tuned. Yeah. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my little book recommendation, and yeah, stay tuned for so many more videos. Bye.